Hey everyone, and welcome to my show. My name is Nick Elston. I'm a leading inspirational speaker, creator of unique mental health engagement strategies, a transformational speaking coach, and founder of Forging People, a community created to empower, inspire, and educate people who truly want to be heard in life and in business. On these shows, I bring you the storytellers, celebrities, speakers, influencers, entrepreneurs, those who have gone from adversity to excitement, who share their stories with vulnerability, transparency, inspiration, and most importantly, completely unfiltered. So without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of The Nick Elston Show. Hey everyone, and a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show. It's season 3, episode 7, and today I have a very special guest to bring you, as always, but a very special and very interesting guest. That lockdown has certainly been a challenge, however, it has sent some really interesting people my way, and this man is certainly one of them, is Gareth Keyte. Big round of applause to Gareth.
Thank you very much.
Hello. You all right?
I'm very good, thank you, Nick. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Good stuff. Welcome to the show. So we were introduced by a mutual contact through the wonderful medium of LinkedIn, which is kind of the only way we saw people for a while. So we're just getting back to that kind of in-person mentality again now, but it's been good for making connections. How has the last 18 months been for you?
I've been the tail end of a really exciting roller coaster. I say exciting, some laughter, tears. I'll go into a little bit more about that a little later on, but very interesting to be part of a business that kind of launched 6 months prior to lockdown. So wow. In-person meetings and coaching just feel really normal now. And as someone who historically has felt a need to have a physical connection or a physical presence with people in order to have effective communication, I thought it can't work. It's never going to work, is it? And my former employers definitely didn't trust people to have kind of mobile working from home unless you had a certain rank. For those who aren't aware, I'm a former police officer. So there was a big, massive national, worldwide cultural change embracing working from home. And for those of us who now kind of work with clients online predominantly, it just seems so natural now.
So online is like the norm for you. And actually, like I said, kudos. Launching and running a business successfully during lockdown, an amazing thing. So actually it's going to be the flip for you. It's kind of getting used to seeing people in person when needed. Although, as I said, online is good enough. Like you, I'm a tactile guy, should we say. I'm still getting a bit confused when I go, this week I traveled up to Glasgow for an event and seeing people I've only ever met online, my usual reaction pre-pandemic was big bear hug, go straight into that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
We end up doing this kind of really weird robot dance. Like, do we help? Do we do elbows? Do we do the shaking? I just ended up asking people like, how do you want to meet kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know some people have got this kind of traffic light system going on. And so if you wear green, you're open to physical approach. If you wear amber, that you got to be asked, you're a bit cautious. And if you go red, it's like steer clear.
So, really? I've not heard that. I like red as well. Red's one of my colours.
And we've really gone down a rabbit hole very quickly here. So I'm going to backtrack this a second. Right. Who are you? And actually, by the way, the tail end of that lockdown period, you have just got married and honeymoon in Greece. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm really, really fortunate. I'll tell you what, I'll start at the beginning. So
for a good place to start. We don't tend to do it very often on here, but we should really.
Well, try not to go down any rabbit holes. Please pull me back if I do. So for those astute listeners and watchers, probably picked up that I have a Welsh accent. I was born and brought up in South Wales, and my parents originated in the Midlands, where I'm based now, and they decided when they got married they were going to move to the coast in South Wales. And hardworking parents. Unskilled labour taught us our values, me and my brother, when we came along. Bit of a tough time, English parents, English accent in a small mining town in South Wales, but we got through it. And the tough times in school really made me realize I wanted to go into a career where I helped people. And I didn't really know, I didn't have much direction until my late teens, where I joined the military and I set my stall out that I wanted to set my sights really high and joined the Royal Marines.
Nice.
So 4.5 years after passing out, I'd learned an awful lot about myself around my mental and physical resilience. I really did think I was unbreakable, and such is the way that you're trained and conditioned in that environment. And I learned a lot about camaraderie, team spirit, supporting each other, loyalty. So really enhanced the values that my parents had given me. And then a few years later, again, we're in 1999 at this point, where I was in my early 20s and I'd met my now ex-wife, but mother of my children, and decided we wanted to settle down, get married, buy a house. And I didn't really think the military was conducive to that. So I joined the police, and I joined West Mercia Police because I felt I was a natural fit for that. I wanted to help people, just like the reasons I joined the military, to help the people who couldn't help themselves. Same reasons for joining the police and serving my community then rather than the country. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. My career, I would consider my career on the whole, 21 years later, a massive success. I did everything I ever wanted to do in policing. I felt I was a good role model for my kids, my family, my friends. And I did everything that you see on the telly, all the things that people are drawn towards watching or reading. I've been involved in that for short times or long times. And I've been a detective for most of my career. So cut me through the middle like a stick of rock. My policing values were the same as my personal values. Until about 5 years ago, I started to be aware of changes in my behavior and my thinking and my drive and my determination and my ability to deal with complexity, which was the mainstay of my job really as a detective. And I got to the rank of inspector by the time I'd left. So I was responsible for growing teams of people. So I had a leadership role in the end, and I very much believe in rolling my sleeves up and standing shoulder to shoulder with the people I work with. But I was really starting to notice how the job was affecting people's mental health and their resilience, whether it be their physical resilience, their mental resilience, and their emotional, keeping their emotions in check in the workplace. So I became aware that I was starting to get more and more affected by the stuff that was going on around me. And there's some things I can't talk about, unfortunately, Nick, because they're still ongoing in relation to holding the organisation to account.
Of course.
I'll just leave it at that. But I saw some things that offended my values that I stood up against. And I expected the support of the organisation, but I didn't get it, like many people. And I refuse to go to the tabloids with it. I deal with it in my own way, and I want to hold the organisation to account for the things that they failed to do for me and some of the people I care deeply about, who I work with. So 4 years ago, for the first time in my work career, I went long-term sick. I'd got to work, and how this worked for me, I fell over what's colloquially called a nervous breakdown. I had acute symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I later was diagnosed. But what it did, it just, from a man's perspective, and I'm not diluting the effect it has on women either, but I can only speak from a man's perspective. I was brought up with, in a traditional way, and rightly or wrongly, whether you agree with it in modern parenting standards, I was brought up to be strong, resilient. Big boys don't cry. You keep your emotions in check. We are problem solvers, and we're the knights on a horse, protecting everybody, especially those close to us. And I felt incredibly lost, ashamed of an illness that I couldn't describe to people. I didn't know what was happening. I was so scared as well. And during those first few months that I was off sick, for the first time, as I said, in my work career, I started to look at myself in a different way. And I felt like a victim. I really did. I had a very much a victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? Why didn't people support me? Blaming everyone and everything around me for the position I found myself in. And it was only through some great counselling support, some specialists, psychotherapy, and I had a very, very, very good clinical psychologist called Dr. Tracy Lavis, who specialises in trauma and policing, who helped me see what was going on with me and have a greater understanding of the effects my condition was having on me and what was happening to my body, but it wasn't really dealing with the root causes of it, which little did I realise, some of it was anchored back in my youth, the way that I thought and the way that I put so much store in protecting others was probably as a result of the kind of bullying I experienced when I was a little boy. And I kind of thought I'd put that to bed, but so coaching allowed me to let go of some of the emotional baggage, perhaps that was influencing my PTSD. And I really need to make this clear now, because I do this when I speak to people. I do a lot of voluntary work, and I do some work with veterans, and whether veterans of the military or veterans from the police, and some who are going through some challenges themselves. That I don't pretend that I'm cured. I'm far from it. That coaching doesn't cure you. It just allows you to see the world in a different way. You kind of you can't change the past. There's no power in the past. But what I understand now is I can think and feel differently about it. So the effects aren't as acute as they were back then. And I've got, some tools that I use that I've learned to be able to kind of to function again, because I wasn't functioning properly in the deepest, darkest days, the early stages of that breakdown, and then having to find a way out for myself with the help of some really, really good people.
Wow.
So I left the police last year. The relationship couldn't continue. They accepted that mine was an injury caused on duty. So those of you viewers or listeners who are aware of the policing terminology, if you have an injury on duty, then they're duty bound to support you. But when that relationship can no longer function, my trauma lay in the workplace. So they realised that they had no choice to allow me to apply for an early ill health retirement, which is exactly what I did. And then through my recovery, which is an ongoing process, I'm a whip, work in progress. But I was a student, I was a client of coaching, then a student of coaching. And in order to kind of keep my brain active and to keep learning, I then did my master coaches course. I became a master coach of NLP coaching last year. And I use that to help myself and help other people. I get tremendous amount of self-worth, self-satisfaction, self-awareness in continuing to grow and helping other people.
Amazing.
I'm going to take a drink now because I'm a bit hoarse, like you.
No, you can.
You leave with your speaking.
As a top, very, very informal chat. Mm-hmm. Got a nice mug of tea going on here, so we're all good. It's fine. So that kind of takes you to that kind of point where we kicked off, I guess. So going into coaching yourself, launching the business. How did that start? How did the idea stem from? That kind of stuff.
Well, my now wife got married last.
Does that still feel weird saying that, wife?
Yeah, got to get used to it. And wearing a ring again after 4 years, 5 years. So I met Dawn 4 years ago, 2 weeks' time. And she has been absolutely fundamental in my steps to recovery, really, and for re-establishing my self-esteem, self-worth. But we went on a coaching journey together, both had an interest in personal development. We attended a one-day introduction to NLP coaching. Then I was all in from that stage because I needed something else to focus on because I was still in a dark place. So I started to learn some of the techniques and learn how to use coaching methodology to help myself predominantly, but also use that. I started to think about coaching in a way that if only I had picked up these skills or been taught these skills early on in either my police career or my military career, I might have been an even more effective communicator. I probably wouldn't have had emotional responses to certain things that would be appropriate in some cases, but inappropriate in others. Getting angry with other people if they start being confrontational, etc. I prided myself on being a good communicator as a police officer anyway. I was a public order commander, initial firearms commander, and one of my last roles was a community policing inspector. So really, really rely on effective communication. But this was a different level, and I wanted to learn more, not just to help myself, but to be able to help others. And as time's gone on, I've disengaged from policing, and some of it's been hard. I miss the people I worked with. I miss the responsibility and the positive effect you can have on people. But I wanted to find something that could give me the same. I really do believe my purpose in life, always has been from when I was a teenager, was to help others. But the reason we called it Oxygen, the company Oxygen, just like the analogy when you get on a plane, the oxygen mask, you can't help others before helping yourself. Put your own oxygen mask on first. And I realized that, and that came into sharp focus for me. I always believed if the Royal Marines can't beat me, then policing can't beat me, surely. And certainly some of the people within policing who were responsible for some of the things that I encountered, and those of my colleagues, they use kind of some subtle gaslighting, professionally undermining people from a distance, because I couldn't be physically intimidated, but they can undermine you in different ways. So I wanted to help people on my terms without being bound by restrictive codes of conduct, policies and procedures that can sometimes work against you. So piecemeal, I've done a lot of stuff for free just to build my skills up, and found that by sharing my experiences, people begin to trust me. Shared experience. I've walked many miles in the shoes that some of my clients walk in, and some of those clients, they're not paying. Some are paying. I choose to do stuff, the work for free that I do, because I want to give back. Because not everybody can access coaching either.
No,
I can do it on my terms. My days of working a 70, 80-hour week are long gone. I haven't got the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth, or the physical kind of resilience for that anymore. So I get to do it on my terms. So so I love that aspect of it.
That's really cool, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, what was really kind of fascinating to me from our first conversation was this kind of the police force in general meant so much to you in terms of its principles and the reason why you joined it to start with. Have the actions of some individuals within that changed your whole perception of the police force?
Oh, undoubtedly. Absolutely, undoubtedly. Now, and again, I'll be really, really clear. I'm not anti-police at all. I absolutely uphold, champion and support the fantastic work that the police do in protecting communities, protecting people from harm. And the people who I'm describing, surreptitiously, they are in such a minority, but I believe it's a cultural problem. I've experienced it myself. So it's changing now, where they're professionalizing access into the police with requiring a degree, whether either as a precursor to join or a commitment to go through the degree process in your first few years. Tremendous pressure on those young minds as well. Student officers, learning to become police officers and all that goes along with it, as well as embarking on quite an involved academic process as well. I've taken myself off that a little bit.
That's fine.
Bring me back.
It's not. You actually, it's really interesting that there have been several people on the show. One that springs to mind immediately is a lady called Zoe Thompson, who went into the kind of the coaching world from the police force herself, and it's really interesting that kind of. And you've mentioned that lived experience piece already, and I'm a firm believer that, obviously, given what I do, lived experience is the perfect vehicle to help people to engage from the problem to the solution.
Yes.
without it necessarily being the solution. So actually, yeah, your training stood you in good stead, but also the things that you've experienced along the way, good and bad, have also it's empowered you to help other people so they may not have to experience the same challenges. I mean, you mentioned the things like resilience and the unbreakable, that kind of mindset and values, those kind of things. Those are exactly the things that you can help people with now. But the reason they connect with you is because you've experienced what it's like to be in a place where you haven't always had those things. Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially because when you're younger, regardless of whether you've got a military background or not, people have got to show incredible resilience in different ways. And to have your self-belief destroyed by individuals or organizations or processes that so offend or shatter your values or shatter your beliefs, it is devastating, and it is traumatic. The more we learn about mental health, the more people talk about it, importantly as well, leaning into their vulnerability, borrowing a line from Brené Brown, it's absolutely right. There's courage in leaning into your vulnerability, accepting it.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
So, I'm quite happily stand here and say, no one would have expected this to happen to me. Anybody who knew me best put me down as a problem solver. I wasn't easily shaken at all. So to hear and to see me in the way that my condition affected me, it doesn't define me. And you hear that said a lot of the time when people have been victims of abuse, or they refuse to let those things define them. And I'm in agreement with that. You've got to get to that stage, though. So I needed to be led to a place where I could. If you imagine a big, deep, dark hole, surround yourself with good, positive people rather than the naysayers who can build you up, but also, reach out to the people who know how far into that hole to reach in and guide you out, not drag you out, because you've got to want to get out as well and see for yourself that you can lead yourself out there. Now, there may be people listening to this not believing it's possible for themselves. You've got to try. You've got to try and not have a limiting belief that won't work for me, or I'm not good enough in some way. That's one of the main things that I try and help people overcome.
Narrative is huge. Yeah, narrative is huge. I kind of very much we talk ourselves into a losing game almost by default. Like you said, I'm not good enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not good looking enough, I could never do that. Very easily do we go to that actually by changing that narrative. But I think the saddest thing that I see, I guess, I'm not solution focused in the way that you are. I don't coach. So in terms of having interactions with audiences, the saddest thing I see is that people are waiting for permission to step up in any given situation, whether that's for help or to develop, or because of that, like you said, a limiting belief. We've got this thing that comfort zones are comfortable. They're not. A toxic relationship is a comfort zone. It's easier to stay in a position of pain and frustration than it is to do something about it. Really, really interesting. Are you truly being heard in life, in education, in business? Your ability to deliver any message with clarity, power, and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success, personally and professionally. Forging People, founded by Nick Elston, is an online community developed to empower, inspire, engage, and educate you to truly step up. Complete with online courses, early access to in-person coaching and events, free resources, and a community of like-minded people, Forging People will help you manage anxiety, boost confidence, and give you the tools to speak to any audience, whether it's one person or 1 million people. Speaking is more than just standing on stage. Speaking is business. Speaking is leadership. Speaking is influencing. Speaking is life. Contact Nick's team today on pa@nickelston.com or visit nickelston.com today to register your interest. This is the sign you've been looking for. there's a couple of things I wanted you to kind of explain to my audience, if you could.
Sure.
So two things you mentioned. You mentioned clinical psychology and counselling and coaching. Walk us through the kind of nuances of those three things. What's the difference between those three areas of help?
Right. Well, I'm not going to give a definition of those because there will be experts who listen and go, he's cuffed that one. So I'll give it from my own perspective. So for me, I had some traditional counselling talk therapy, which for me, tell me how you're feeling, and I've described my emotions and my physiology when going into my first counselling sessions was one. If you ever spoke to those counsellors, they would describe me as like, me as a police officer, I'd be looking and I'd be paying them some attention in a shady street, thinking that they're up to no good. I wanted to hide myself away from the world, crippled by this shame and this lack of understanding of what was happening to me. And I was encouraged to talk about the things that were hurting me the most. And I found it painful, but I also found it a release as well. It was someone was listening without judgment and encouraging me to talk about the things that were hurting me the most. So after a period of time, I got to a stage where I'd had about six counselling sessions, which is generally what you get initially to the police. You can ask for more as well. I've got to say the support that I got from the occupational health teams was fantastic. And then I went to see a specialist, Dr. Lavis, and again encouraged me to talk and explain to me as well why I was responding in such a way, why my mind was, why I was in crisis, and giving me little bits of information, tasking homework as well for me to go away and read certain things to enhance my understanding, because you only have like 50 minutes at a time, perhaps. So it helped, as I said before, it helped me understand what was happening to me, but didn't necessarily release the anger, the resentment, the embitterment, lots of embitterment against the organisation, organisational failings, which I documented, presented to them, and they didn't support me. I love being a cop. I love that organisation. I love my policing family. And in my time of need, I didn't feel that I was getting the love that it wasn't reciprocated. So from there, I was signed off, then went back to work for a while, and there were key triggers still in the workplace that was still affecting me. Went back for a little bit more therapy. And then it was agreed that while I was still living the trauma in the workplace environment was the trauma trigger. I wasn't going to carry on benefiting from long-term psychotherapy, talk therapy. So, like I say, almost like an accidental tourist, I was interested in self-help. Dawn and I saw this program of coaching. We got involved in it, started to learn about it. And then when I decided to throw myself all in and become a client of it, breakthrough coaching, which is what I like to do now, 6 to 8 sessions, dealing with limiting beliefs, past emotional trauma, past emotion, releasing the emotions of the past, etc. I went through it, and I definitely found it helped. It allowed, and it was content free. The difference being for me, I didn't have to talk about the things that were hurting me, some of which I felt were really personal, and I didn't want to be judged. Like who does want to be judged? Yeah. And opening up to a stranger is really difficult, really difficult. And it does get easier the more you do it. And that first time, it can be really emotionally draining. But I found the coaching incredibly helpful to learn the different ways in which I process information, my behavior, how I could influence my behavior, keep my emotions in check, or more importantly, release some of the negative emotions from the past. And what that allowed me to do then was rather be driven by negative emotions, be driven by reconnect with my values, my beliefs, and then stand my ground stronger and harder. I'm still affected by it without a shadow of a doubt, because they're very, very painful things I experienced. But I'm much better at dealing with them. I sleep a bit better now as well. Terrible sleep. I wasn't, well, these 4 pillars of positive mental health, good hydration, nutritious kind of diet, regular exercise and good sleep, 4 things that are fundamental to it. In policing, you make excuses by saying the shift. Oh, it's the shift. That's why I have to eat junk food, or that's why I drink too much coffee to keep myself awake, or that's why I take Pro Plus or whatever to keep myself functioning high. It's self-soothing, and we use it as an excuse. And I defy any police force. There'll be at least 1 or 2 people on the shift who go, I'm in the state that I am because it's the shifts. Blame the job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are some unhelpful people still in the job as well. The people who are. Not all people, but some people who are critical of those people who are struggling and see them as a weak link, as opposed to someone who's requiring or needing support. I remember, I had a former police sergeant when I joined, so 20 odd years ago now, and behaviours in the workplace were different then. There was someone who was struggling. And I remember this sergeant came up with a little rhyme. I think he thought he was trying to encourage, but definitely wasn't. He said, "When you're down and feeling blue, remember you joined us. We didn't join you. Now get back to work and go on doing your job." That attitude wouldn't be tolerated nowadays. But it's something I've always remembered and thought, if I ever become a sergeant or an inspector, which I did. I wouldn't want to kind of dismiss people's pain in such a way.
No, absolutely. I think that lived experience thing as well is interesting. I also get that. I think when you're in front of people, I actually make a point of saying, this is not hallelujah, I'm cured. I manage my stuff daily. Here's kind of how I do that. Yeah, to greater or lesser extent, depending on what day it is and how I'm feeling at the time. So I absolutely get that. You also mentioned NLP, which I know is neuro-linguistic programming. Mm-hmm. We've had a couple of people kind of explain their take on it, because like anything, it's subjective in terms of how they deliver it, how they feel about it. And they're all great practitioners, as you are as well. What was your take on NLP to people that are new to the terminology, shall we say?
I love a metaphor. Okay. I love a metaphor. So,
me too.
I've got an iPhone. I was notified that I was notified by Apple or whoever it would be to say, you haven't got the latest version of the software. You're vulnerable because you haven't got an upgrade. So, kind of turn it off. Click on upgrade software. Phone's out of use for a short while, and then all of a sudden you've got a ticky box health check. You've had your health check and your service for your phone. We don't get that for ourselves, do we? We have to wait till you're in so much pain that you go and reach out for a bit of help. So as a metaphor, I think NLP and NLP coaching is a new operating system for your mind and your body. It helps you understand more about yourself because you ask yourself the questions, or the coach leads you through a series of questions and challenges your thinking till you actually get to the other side of it. So talk a little bit, as if I talked you through a breakthrough process, initially, which takes 6 to 8 weeks, talk about the one thing that if you could change about your life, if it was changed, if you could wave a magic wand, how your life would be different, would have the best effect. And we'll work on that one thing during that period. And then once we've identified that, go through a bit of a detailed personal history, tell me about your family, asking kind of probing questions around the relationship between the problem and your family life, your time growing up, etc. You get into a little bit of, let's join the dots and see whether the client recognizes a pattern of behaviors linked to past events or with the problem they're presented with. We examine people's values in relation to the problem. And then something that we rarely do is examine our values and then rank those values and then go, are my values in the right order? Have I got the right priority for my values? Some of the NLP techniques that we use can reorder those values so you can be even more effective. Deal with then motivation, because you can have good and bad motivation. So if you had motivation, for me, in the lead up to our wedding, I was motivated to slim down, look the best that I could be for a very long time, because, poor eating and drinking habits historically, I had a lot of work to do with myself. But some people who would kind of relate to that might go, I don't want to be overweight. So if you don't want to be something, so you get far enough away from it, you might lose enough weight that you're no longer in pain. The thing that you didn't want, you no longer, it's not so much of a pressing issue. And then we all know that, like a little bit of elastic, as soon as you get into a comfort zone again, you start moving pulled back towards that thing that you don't want. And your unconscious mind, we do a lot of work with the unconscious mind, focuses on the things that you kind of keep on telling yourself. So if you keep on telling yourself, I don't want, eventually you get pulled back towards what you don't want, rather than things that you do want. You focus on something in the future that you pull yourself towards. I'm going to be, for me, it was like 13 and a half stone, dropping from the 15 stone one that I was at the beginning of the process, pulling myself towards a target. And once I've got there, right, course correct, reset, right, it's my new ground zero. What am I going for now? Anchor myself to something in the future and pull myself towards it. So we talk about motivation in the context of the one thing.
Mm.
And from there on, then we talk about letting go of the emotions of the past, the negative emotions, making sure, again, I've got to be really clear on this. Anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, and shame are all appropriate in the right circumstances. It's just when we hold on to it, as time goes on, it doesn't serve us. It's no power. There's no power in holding on to those negative things. So some of the NLP processes that we go through release those negative emotions. And you release the emotion and take the learning from it. How can that make my life better now and in the future?
And that's huge. That is huge.
Massive.
I find it fascinating. And by the way, that's a brilliant way of explaining it. Really, really is. Even to myself, knowing little bits of stuff, that was a really great way of shining a new light on it for me. So thank you. I think that anchoring element is so important. One of the kind of examples I use, even yesterday when I was doing a talk, was around if you've ever been kind of driving or walking along and you've heard a song and it just makes you cry immediately or it makes you laugh immediately. And it's not the song necessarily, it's unless you like the Smiths or Morrissey or something. It's your relationship to that from a past event, a past person, whatever it may be. I find that absolutely fascinating. And I mean, this could go on for a day, this episode, because I just love what you do. One thing I do want to mention, though, if it's okay with you, is that certainly when I started to kind of, in January this year, I started my kind of counselling. Again, every Friday afternoon I have counselling, and as a non-solution focused person in the mental health space, I find it really helpful to have a neutral place to go to talk and stuff. But the term that you very quickly came up with, and I'm kind of resonating a lot with what you're saying, is as a wounded healer. That were the people that have experienced and carried and lived, and now we're trying to help as many people as possible. But sometimes it can be the detriment to ourselves. So we'll give everything that we've got until we're absolutely running on fumes or less.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like that? And how do you bring yourself back? What helps you recover when you're feeling that? What foundations do you have in place to kind of pick your own well-being up when you need it the most?
Well, I've got a wonderful wife and family who are incredibly supportive. Very difficult for me to kind of admit to them what was going on in my life. The biggest challenge I found was telling my children that I was experiencing mental health problems and mental health crisis. To answer your question, as an ethical coach, with a strong moral compass, things present themselves. The NLP process allows you to file things away appropriately in your mind, but also what it does do then, it kind of loosens kind of fixed thinking, and then things pop up, present themselves, and then sometimes it can be, I'll have a nagging doubt, or I'll be in conflict. On one hand, I want to do this. On the other hand, I want to do that. Or and I'll speak to Dawn and I'll say, "Can you do me a favor? Talk things through." And then, because she's a qualified coach as well, I'll have coaching from her, and some separate coaching from someone else who we were doing our training with, another very good coach. So, using the leadership principles of if you're the most intelligent person in the room and you know all the facts, then you're in the wrong room. You should surround yourself with people who know more than you do. That's where good leadership comes in. I learned that from some wise old sage, sort of past bosses that I've had. I surround myself with the go-to people that if I'm in crisis, I'm starting to feel a dip. I don't want to wait till I'm in crisis. I want to be able to reach out and say, listen without judgment, but please feel free to give me, a little bit of coaching advice and what do you do in these circumstances? And invariably, I feel better as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned leadership there almost seamlessly. That was the bit I wanted to squeeze in before we finish this episode, actually, was one of your passions is to use not just your training, but also your experiences to help forge those leadership skills with people from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
As we go into, and it's something I mentioned on the show 3 months ago, so I promise if you look back, you can fact check me, this is true. I said from a mental health perspective, in terms of leadership, that the biggest challenges were yet to come. In a lot of ways, the pandemic and the lockdown was easier when we had enforced regulations because we had just one set of rules to play by. But now we're going into a time where there is different opinions, different choices, different perspectives. There's no real one set of rules. Leaders who were very confident before, not really had to manage anxiety too much, are now starting to struggle. What would be your kind of advice to those people as you go into the next period?
So take from this what's ever applicable to you. I'm going to use policing as an example because I know it's been a big part of my life. So if I knew at the beginning what I know now, I am pretty confident, knowing my experiences in depth, that I would have been able to weather the storm a lot more. So I have a theory and I'm testing that theory and I've got some academic backing for that now. So you won't be surprised, as a former detective, I did my homework on this and I did a subject access freedom of information request to all 43 forces in the UK, police forces in the UK. I wanted to know the extent nationally, pre-COVID, so we can't skew the figures, pre-COVID, what's the extent of psychological illness, long-term sickness in each of those forces? And it was staggering. It was, I think it was 550,000 working days lost. Not your weekends, your working days lost across UK policing. You put a price on that and the average PC's daily wage. It's massive. It's multi-million pounds. So there's your starting point. Problem. Solution. So as it stands at the moment, you've got every single police force. There's a massive growth in mental health first aid. Absolutely right. You should be able to recognize the signs and symptoms, recognize when someone needs some additional support. There's been leadership training as well. But it's a reactive response. It's a response to a crisis. It's a response to a growing problem. So again, I said I like a metaphor. It's like having a swimming pool. All your police officers are in there treading water and they're trying to get the job done. So the reactive response they're doing is putting more lifeguards around the pool. But those lifeguards are omnicompetent. Those lifeguards have got a policing job to do as well. They're not always looking in the pool. Some people are sinking. Some people are really struggling. Some people are casualties of it. We all know the statistics nationally, certainly within policing, male and female suicides on the increase. So for me, the salute, I would say, it's just the opinion of Gareth Keyte, bruised and battered, kind of soldier, been on the front line, I'm a casualty of war and I come out the other side of it and I'm a veteran and I'm lucky to be, where I am. So my view, and it's now been adopted by, I'm not going to mention it just yet because probably by the time this podcast comes out, I will have celebrated it and that we will have gone public. But the University of Law, who do the pre-joining degree for student officers, we've been in talks for a few months, and their director of academic enhancement, director of student enhancement, has led a funding project to fund a pilot for the first year cohort of policing students to have some coaching from Oxygen Coaching Company, some resilience and mental health coaching. So they have something that traditional police officers never had. they had the stuff that I've talked about in generic terms. It's knowledge as opposed to direct one-on-one coaching, but it's knowledge about preferred representational styles. Everybody learns in different ways, how to get into rapport, understanding the way that the mind works and the unconscious mind. Lots and lots of good information that would enhance their skills in communication, but not only that, becoming so self-aware that they can go, not rely on someone else, their line manager, to say, are you all right? It's okay not to be okay is a phrase that's often used in terms of mental health. If you can recognize the signs yourself and understand that people self-soothe through alcohol, through drugs, through eating, through gambling, whatever their vice is. So generally because they're unhappy in some aspect of their life. And some of the coaching methodology we want to impart is intended to help those young people who are going into a 30, 40-year career in public service, going to see the best and the worst that society does to each other, with each other, but also some very, very rewarding roles within policing as well, helping people and protecting people. We're adding to their suite of skills that stop them from drowning. We're teaching them to swim rather than relying on the lifeguard to jump in and save them.
Phenomenal, and more power to your elbow. I love the fact that you've gone right to the source, right to the root to create big change, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, I know that will really ripple out. So thank you so much. Before you go, the question I ask all of the guests have on the show is, I'm going to set the scene now. I'm now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing. You are sat in the green room. Your walk-on music kicks on, that song that motivates you, that lifts you, that picks you up, puts you at peak state, the one you're going to run onto and deliver. What would that track be, Gareth Keyte?
Man, I am there. I've just got goosebumps as you're describing it, setting the scene. What a way to set me up for that. Always, since I was a kid, I was always into Rocky. It motivated me from my training to go into the military, and since then as well, it's going to be Going the Distance by Bill Conti. So from the Rocky story, and put it on Spotify. In fact, I'm going to put it on Spotify after this.
Absolutely.
Put it on as well. It absolutely is a fantastically motivating piece of music for whatever you decide to do. But that'll be mine, yeah.
Good choice.
I'm going to visualize that now.
Absolutely. Good choice. Gareth Keyte, you're a top man. Big round of applause. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Do connect with Gareth. All of his contact details are in the bio. Absolutely important. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions you have about stuff too. Any parting wisdom?
Always believe in yourself. Don't listen to your doubters, and surround yourself always with positive people.
Boom. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to this week's show. We'll be back again next Friday with another fun-packed and amazing episode. But for now, be well, be happy, take care, and I'll see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. And that's a wrap. A big thank you for tuning into today's episode. Please do leave us a like and hit subscribe for the fantastic upcoming episodes that I will be bringing to you, featuring more amazing guests. But for now, be well, be happy, be safe, and remember, as I always say, it's what you do next that counts. Until next time on the Nick Elston Show, take care. I'll see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.